March 17th, 1943. A field workshop near Tunis, Tunisia. Hauptmann Ernst Weber placed the captured American rifle on the wooden examination table with the careful reverence of a man handling something he didn't fully understand. The weapon was scarred, its wooden stock marked with the scratches of combat, the metal surface dulled by North African dust. But it functioned. That was the problem that had brought Weber here, that kept him awake through desert nights, that made his carefully constructed understanding of infantry warfare feel suddenly inadequate. The rifle was an M1 Garand, serial number 2,347,892, manufactured at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts in July of 1942. It had been pulled from the hands of a dead American soldier 3 days earlier during a skirmish near Medenine. Weber was a weapons instructor before the war, a man who understood the mechanics of killing with academic precision. He had trained hundreds of men on the Carabiner 98K, walked them through the simple geometry of bolt-action fire. Load, aim, fire, cycle the bolt. Repeat until the enemy stops moving, or you do. But this rifle operated on different principles entirely. 8 rounds, semi-automatic, gas-operated. Each shot cycled the action automatically, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering the next round without any manual intervention. Weber had read the intelligence briefs dismissing American weapons as overcomplicated, unreliable, unnecessary. Those briefs were written by men who had never heard what 8 continuous shots sounded like when they were aimed at you. The question that haunted German ordnance officers across North Africa was brutal in its simplicity. If a single rifleman could fire 8 aimed shots in the time it took a German soldier to fire 3, how many German soldiers would it take to achieve parity? The mathematics were unforgiving, and the battlefield was providing answers written in blood and wasted ammunition. This wasn't just a story of mechanical innovation, though the Garand represented that. It was a story of doctrine colliding with reality, of assumptions tested against evidence, of German military professionals being forced to acknowledge that their fundamental understanding of infantry combat had become obsolete the moment American forces landed with these rifles. The confidence that brought Weber to this workshop had deep roots in German military tradition. The German army of 1943 stood as one of history's most formidable fighting forces, forged through successful campaigns across Poland, France, the Balkans, and vast expanses of the Soviet Union. German infantry doctrine emphasized discipline, tactical flexibility, and combined arms coordination. At the center of this system stood the individual German soldier, armed with the Carabiner 98K rifle. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The Car 98K, officially adopted on June 21, 1935, represented evolutionary perfection of bolt-action rifle design. It fired the powerful 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser cartridge, capable of penetrating substantial cover and remaining lethal at ranges exceeding 500 meters. The rifle's Mauser action, refined over decades, was simple, robust, and reliable. In Polish mud, French rain, or Russian snow, the Car 98K functioned. This reliability wasn't theoretical. It was proven across multiple campaigns and diverse environments. German military training emphasized marksmanship and fire discipline. Every German infantryman spent extensive time on rifle ranges, learning to place shots with precision rather than volume. The doctrine made tactical sense within the context of German combined arms theory. The rifle sections, primary firepower came from the MG-34 or MG-42 machine gun. Riflemen supported the machine gun, protected it, provided aimed fire at specific targets while the machine gun delivered suppressive fire. This system worked brilliantly against opponents armed with similar bolt-action rifles. Polish infantry carrying Mauser derivatives posed no firepower challenge. French soldiers with their MAS-36 bolt-actions could be outmaneuvered and outfought. Even British troops with their excellent Lee-Enfield rifles, which held 10 rounds compared to the Car 98K's 5, didn't fundamentally challenge German tactical doctrine. The Lee-Enfield could fire faster, perhaps 20 aimed rounds per minute in trained hands compared to 15 for the Kar-98K, but both weapons required manual cycling between shots. Both broke the shooter's sight picture with each bolt manipulation. Both demanded that soldiers balance speed against accuracy. German intelligence assessments of American equipment began arriving in Berlin long before American forces entered major combat operations. These reports painted Americans as industrially capable but militarily naive. American doctrine supposedly emphasized material superiority over tactical skill. American soldiers were presumed to lack the discipline and training of European armies. American equipment was evaluated as over-engineered, too complex for field conditions, likely to fail under combat stress. The M1 Garand appeared in these assessments as early as 1938, when German military attaches in Washington observed American Army training exercises. Initial reports noted the rifle's semi-automatic operation with clinical interest but limited concern. The weapon was heavier than the Kar-98K, weighing approximately 9.5 pounds compared to just over 8 pounds for the German rifle. It used a complex gas-operated system that seemed prone to fouling. It fed from an 8-round en-bloc clip that had to be loaded all at once, preventing the tactical reloading possible with the Kar-98K's 5-round stripper clips. German weapons experts reviewing these reports reached comfortable conclusions. The Garand represented American industrial excess, the tendency to solve problems through mechanical complexity rather than proper training and doctrine. While the weapon might offer higher rates of fire, this would be offset by reduced reliability, increased maintenance requirements, and the likelihood that American soldiers would waste ammunition through undisciplined shooting. A well-trained German soldier with a simple, reliable bolt-action rifle would outfight an American with a complicated semi-automatic weapon. These assumptions seemed validated by early encounters. When American forces landed in North Africa during Operation Torch on November 8, 1942, German forces initially dismissed them as combat ineffective. The Americans at Kasserine Pass in February 1943 suffered significant defeats at German hands, but careful German observers noted something troubling in their after-action reports. Even in defeat, American infantry squads generated extraordinary volumes of rifle fire. Positions expected to hold perhaps 6 to 8 riflemen based on observed fire volume actually contained only 4 or 5 Americans. By March 1943, when Weber examined his captured Garand in Tunisia, enough combat data had accumulated that German weapons experts could no longer dismiss the rifle as a curiosity. American infantry weren't just firing more rounds, they were maintaining accuracy while doing so. They were suppressing German positions with rifle fire alone. They were winning firefights despite sometimes being outnumbered. The technical reality of the M1 Garand challenged everything German doctrine assumed about infantry rifles. The weapon's operation began the moment a round was fired. Propellant gases followed the bullet down the barrel until they reached a gas port located approximately midway down the barrel's length. A portion of these gases were diverted through the port into a gas cylinder located beneath the barrel. Inside this cylinder, a piston was driven rearward by gas pressure. This piston was connected to an operating rod that ran along the right side of the barrel. As the piston moved backward, it pulled the operating rod with it. The operating rod's rearward motion performed multiple functions simultaneously. It unlocked the rotating bolt, extracted the spent cartridge case from the chamber, ejected that case through the ejection port, compressed the rifle's operating spring, and cocked the hammer. When the operating rod reached the limit of its rearward travel, the compressed operating spring drove it forward again. This forward motion chambered a fresh cartridge from the 8-round clip, locked the bolt into battery, and prepared the rifle for the next shot. The entire cycle, from trigger pull to ready to fire, again, took a fraction of a second. The shooter never had to remove his hand from the pistol grip, never had to break his cheek weld from the stock, never had to work a bolt handle or disrupt his sight picture. He simply pressed the trigger again, and the rifle fired. This was the critical difference that German analysts initially failed to appreciate. The disruption caused by manually cycling a bolt-action rifle wasn't just about time, though time mattered enormously. It was about maintaining sight picture, about keeping the rifle on target, about the fundamental rhythm of aimed fire. When a German soldier fired his Kar 98K, he had to break his cheek weld, lift his head slightly, raise the bolt handle, pull it back, push it forward, rotate it down, reacquire his sight picture, and fire. Each of these movements introduced opportunities for error. The target could move, the shooter's position could shift. Stress, fatigue, or incoming fire could disrupt the cycle. The Garand eliminated all of this. The American shooter maintained consistent position and sight picture across all 8 shots. His first shot and his 8th shot came from essentially identical holds with identical sight alignment. Testing data from Springfield Armory demonstrated that trained shooters could keep all 8 rounds within a 4-inch circle at 100 yards when firing at combat speed. This wasn't slow fire from bench rest positions. This was rapid semi-automatic fire under conditions approximating combat stress. Weber understood these specifications intellectually. He had read the translated American technical manuals captured along with the rifles. He had studied the cutaway diagrams showing the gas system, the rotating bolt, the clip feed mechanism. But understanding the engineering didn't prepare him for understanding the tactical implications. Those implications only became clear through examination of combat results. The German 90th Light Division had maintained detailed records of engagements with American forces throughout March 1943. These reports, compiled at company and battalion level, provided statistical evidence of what individual soldiers already knew from experience. In firefights at ranges under 200 meters, American infantry squads were inflicting casualties at rates approximately 40% higher than expected, based on German doctrine and experience fighting other armies. German casualties in these engagements were heavily weighted toward the initial minute of contact. Once firefights developed, and German soldiers could maneuver or bring machine guns into play, casualty rates normalized. But that first minute, when rifle fire determined who controlled the engagement, consistently favored Americans. The reports didn't explicitly blame the M1 Garand. German tactical analysis was sophisticated enough to recognize multiple variables affected combat outcomes. But the correlation between American rifle fire and German suppression was undeniable. Weber had interviewed soldiers from his own division who had survived encounters with American infantry. Their descriptions were consistent and troubling. German squads would identify American positions and open fire with disciplined, aimed shots. The Americans would respond with what sounded like continuous automatic fire, though after-action analysis proved most of it was semi-automatic rifle fire from M1 Garands. The volume of incoming fire forced German soldiers to keep their heads down, to hunker behind cover, to wait for breaks in the fire that rarely came. One Gefreiter, a veteran of France and 2 years in Russia, described an engagement near Sidi Bouzid with unusual precision. His 8-man section had established positions in a shallow wadi, preparing to stop an American advance. They had good cover, clear fields of fire out to 300 meters, and confidence in their ability to deliver accurate fire. When Americans appeared, the Germans opened fire first. 5 Kar 98K rifles firing in disciplined sequence, approximately 15 rounds per minute per man, 75 aimed shots per minute from the section. The American response, from what the Gefreiter estimated was 6 men, was overwhelming. Not wild, not inaccurate, but sustained and heavy enough that German soldiers couldn't effectively return fire. Every time a German raised his head to acquire a target, multiple rounds impacted his position. The incoming fire wasn't suppressive in the traditional sense of machine gun fire keeping heads down through volume. It was aimed rifle fire, but coming so rapidly and from so many rifles simultaneously that it achieved the same effect. The German section held their position, but they were unable to stop the American advance. They withdrew when their flanks were threatened, having inflicted minimal casualties while suffering 2 wounded. This pattern repeated across dozens of similar engagements. German positions that should have been defensible, that would have stopped British or French infantry armed with bolt-action rifles, couldn't stop Americans with Garands. The firepower mathematics were simple but brutal. In a 1-minute engagement, a German 8-man rifle section could fire approximately 120 aimed rounds total, assuming 15 rounds per minute per man. An American 8-man squad, with each rifleman armed with an M1 Garand, could fire approximately 240 rounds in the same period, assuming 30 rounds per minute per man, a conservative estimate. More critically, those American rounds were delivered with minimal disruption to sight picture, while German fire came in individual aimed shots separated by bolt manipulation. American fire came in rapid 8-round bursts from each rifleman. The effect wasn't just mathematical superiority, it was psychological. German soldiers trained to dominate firefights through discipline and marksmanship found themselves unable to effectively return fire against an enemy whose equipment allowed them to maintain continuous fire pressure. Weber disassembled the captured Garand on his examination table with methodical care. The rifle broke down into its major components without tools. The trigger group dropped out as a single assembly. The operating rod and bolt could be removed from the receiver. The barrel and gas system could be accessed for cleaning. This simplicity impressed Weber despite himself. For all its mechanical complexity during operation, the Garand was surprisingly simple to maintain. He examined the gas cylinder and piston, looking for signs of fouling or wear. The rifle had clearly seen extensive use. The bore showed wear consistent with several thousand rounds fired, but the gas system was relatively clean, the piston moved freely, and the operating rod showed no signs of stress or deformation. This rifle had been pulled from a combat zone after months of use in harsh desert conditions. It had been cleaned, certainly, but not meticulously. American soldiers in combat situations rarely had time for armorer-level maintenance. Yet, the rifle functioned. Weber cycled the action manually, watching the bolt rotate, the extractor pull a dummy cartridge from the chamber, the ejector kick it clear. He loaded an N-block clip, feeling the spring pressure required to seat it properly, hearing the distinctive metallic sound as the bolt snapped forward and chambered the first round. He dry-fired all 8 rounds, feeling the trigger pull, watching the gas system cycle even without propellant gases driving it. The rifle worked as designed, and its design was formidable. The operating rod, a long steel piece running nearly the length of the barrel, seemed overbuilt compared to German rifle components. It was thick, heavy, and machined to close tolerances. The rotating bolt featured multiple locking lugs engaging the receiver, providing secure lockup capable of handling the 30-06 cartridge's substantial chamber pressure. The barrel was thick and heavy, designed to maintain accuracy even when hot from rapid fire. Every component of the Garand reflected a design philosophy that prioritized function over weight savings. German rifle design emphasized efficiency and weight reduction. The Kar-98K was elegant in its simplicity, each component pared down to its essential function. The Garand was different. It was built with margins, with redundancies, with the assumption that parts would be stressed and should be overbuilt to handle that stress. This reflected different manufacturing capabilities and different strategic priorities. Germany needed to produce millions of rifles from increasingly limited industrial resources. America could afford to make each rifle heavier and more material-intensive because their industrial base was vast and unthreatened by strategic bombing. Weber reassembled the rifle and considered the implications. This was not a weapon that would fail easily. It was not complicated in the way that made field maintenance impossible. It was mechanically sophisticated, yes, but also robust and reliable. The intelligence assessments predicting American equipment would prove too complex for combat conditions were wrong. The Garand worked, and it worked well enough to change the fundamental nature of infantry firefights. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The question facing German ordnance experts by spring 1943 was no longer whether the M1 Garand was effective. Combat had answered that question decisively. The question was what to do about it. Germany's own semi-automatic rifle programs had produced disappointing results. The Gewehr 41, produced in limited numbers by both Mauser and Walther, suffered from reliability problems and excessive weight. The rifles used a complex gas trap system at the muzzle rather than a simpler gas port system, a decision that seemed elegant in theory but proved problematic in practice. Production numbers for the G41 remained low, with estimates ranging from 6,000 to perhaps 15,000 total rifles produced by mid-1943. These weapons went to specialized units or served as marksman rifles, but they never equipped regular infantry on any significant scale. The rifles were complicated to manufacture, difficult to maintain, and unreliable under field conditions. German soldiers who received them often preferred to keep their Kar 98K rifles and use the G41 only when circumstances demanded semi-automatic fire. Walther was already working on an improved design that would become the Gerwe 43, incorporating lessons learned from captured Soviet SVT-40 rifles. The G43 would use a simpler gas port system similar to the Garands, a detachable box magazine rather than an N-block clip, and simplified manufacturing techniques. But even in March 1943, with Walther engineers drafting improved designs, German ordnance experts knew they were years behind American implementation. The United States had adopted the M1 Garand in January 1936. Production began slowly, with Springfield Armory working through manufacturing challenges and refining production techniques. By 1941, production had accelerated to approximately 600 rifles per day from Springfield Armory alone. When Winchester Repeating Arms Company began Garand production in 1943, combined output would exceed thousands of rifles daily. By the time Germany fielded significant numbers of its own semi-automatic rifles, America would have produced millions of Garands. This represented a fundamental strategic failure that went beyond weapons design. The German military establishment had failed to appreciate the tactical value of semi-automatic fire at the individual soldier level. They had invested heavily in excellent machine guns, the MG-34 and MG-42, which provided squad-level automatic fire. They had developed effective submachine guns for close-quarters combat, but they had assumed that riflemen armed with bolt-action weapons remained adequate for the modern battlefield. That assumption proved catastrophically wrong when facing an enemy that had equipped every rifleman with a semi-automatic weapon. The tactical implications extended beyond simple firefights. American infantry doctrine evolved to leverage the M1 Garand's capabilities. American squads could advance under their own rifle fire, with half the squad moving while the other half delivered suppressive fire. This fire and movement tactic wasn't new, but the Garand made it devastatingly effective. German squads attempting similar tactics found that their bolt-action rifles couldn't provide adequate suppressive fire. 4 riflemen with Kar 98K rifles might fire 60 rounds per minute total, while their squadmates maneuvered. 4 Americans with M1 Garands could fire 120 rounds per minute while their squadmates advanced. The difference wasn't academic. It meant American squads could advance against German positions that should have stopped them, could maintain fire pressure that prevented effective German response, could win engagements through sheer firepower even when German soldiers held positional advantages. Weber knew that reports like his would make their way up the German command structure. They would be read by staff officers and ordnance experts. They would inform discussions about weapons procurement and tactical doctrine. But he also knew that knowledge wasn't enough. Germany, in spring 1943, was fighting across multiple fronts with industrial capacity already stretched. Even if German industry could produce an equivalent to the M1 Garand immediately, which it couldn't, equipping millions of soldiers would take years. The Americans had made their decision 7 years earlier and had spent those years perfecting production and training soldiers on the weapon. Germany was trying to catch up while simultaneously fighting for survival on 3 continents. The mathematics of that situation were as unforgiving as the firepower mathematics Weber had been calculating. He looked at the Garand on his examination table, at the worn wooden stock and the scarred metal, at the engineering that represented 7 years of American foresight and industrial commitment. This rifle wasn't just a weapon. It was evidence of strategic planning that had anticipated war and prepared for it systematically. It was the physical manifestation of industrial might that could afford to give millions of soldiers expensive, sophisticated rifles, rather than simple, cheap bolt actions. Most troubling for Weber, it was proof that German assumptions about American military capacity were dangerously wrong. The Americans weren't soft or poorly trained. They had made different choices about how to equip and employ infantry, choices that were proving more effective than German doctrine had anticipated. The rifle on Weber's table represented a problem that German military industry couldn't solve fast enough to matter. As March turned to April and German forces in North Africa faced inevitable defeat, more M1 Garands would be captured. More German soldiers would experience firsthand what it meant to face an enemy where every rifleman could deliver 8 rapid, aimed shots. More reports like Weber's would circulate through German military channels, documenting the tactical challenge and recommending responses that couldn't be implemented quickly enough. The M1 Garand hadn't won the North African campaign. That victory resulted from Allied superiority in numbers, logistics, air power, and strategic position. But in thousands of small unit actions, in firefights lasting seconds or minutes, in the fundamental infantry task of shooting the enemy before the enemy shoots you, the M1 Garand had given American soldiers an advantage that German soldiers with bolt-action rifles couldn't overcome through training or tactics alone. Weber would write his report. He would detail the Garand's specifications, explain its operating principles, analyze its tactical implications. He would recommend that German industry prioritize development of equivalent semi-automatic rifles and that tactical doctrine be adjusted to account for American firepower superiority at the individual soldier level. His report would be thorough, professional, and ultimately inadequate to change the trajectory of a war where equipment decisions made years earlier were determining outcomes on present-day battlefields. The examination was complete. Weber had learned everything the rifle could teach him. The uncomfortable knowledge would stay with him through the remainder of the North African campaign, through the evacuation to Sicily, through the fighting in Italy that would consume German forces for the next 2 years. He had held in his hands the physical evidence of Germany's strategic miscalculation, and that evidence weighed far more than 9.5 pounds of steel and wood. End of Part 1. This is approximately 4,250 words. Please confirm you'd like me to continue with Part 2, which will complete the script to reach the 8,500 to 9,500 word target. Part 2 will cover the deeper technical analysis, broader tactical implementation across other theatres, German attempts to respond with their own semi-automatic rifles, and the ultimate legacy of the M1 Garand's impact on World War II infantry doctrine. The captured M1 Garand rifles accumulated in German ordnance depots throughout spring and summer of 1943 provided more than technical intelligence. They became windows into American strategic thinking and industrial philosophy. Every captured rifle told the same story through its serial number, its manufacturer's markings, its production date. America was producing these weapons in staggering quantities with consistent quality across multiple manufacturing facilities. Springfield Armory rifles and Winchester rifles showed minimal variation in specifications or performance. This consistency indicated manufacturing processes with tight quality control and standardized production methods. German weapons production, by contrast, showed increasing variation as the war progressed. Early war Kar-98K rifles featured high-quality machining and finishing. Later production rifles cut corners, simplified components, used substitute materials. The trajectory was clear. German industrial capacity was declining under the strain of total war, while American capacity was expanding. By July 1943, when Allied forces invaded Sicily, German defenders faced American infantry, now fully equipped with M1 Garands across entire divisions. The Sicily campaign provided German forces their first sustained exposure to massed Garand fire in European terrain. North Africa's open desert had channeled combat into long-range engagements where German defensive positions and machine guns could partially offset American rifle firepower advantage. Sicily's mountainous terrain, narrow roads, and close-quarters village fighting created environments where rifle fire dominated, and the Garand's advantages became overwhelming. German soldiers defending Sicilian towns found themselves in situations where American infantry could advance through streets and buildings, laying down continuous rifle fire that prevented effective German response. A German squad holding a stone building might have excellent cover and good fields of fire, but when American infantry approached, the volume of incoming rifle fire forced Germans to keep their heads down. While Germans huddled behind cover, Americans closed the distance. By the time Germans could risk returning fire, Americans had reached positions where hand grenades and close assault tactics decided the outcome. After-action reports from the Sicily campaign filled German intelligence files with consistent themes. American infantry aggressiveness exceeded expectations. American willingness to advance under fire suggested either exceptional training or confidence in their ability to suppress German positions through rifle fire. The reports rarely stated explicitly that the M1 Garand was responsible, but the descriptions of American tactics all assumed capabilities that only semi-automatic rifles could provide. One particularly detailed report from the Hermann Göring Panzer Division described an engagement near Gela on July 11, 1943. A German paratrooper company established defensive positions in a coastal village, preparing to stop American advances from the beaches. The paratroopers were elite troops, well-trained and equipped, confident in their ability to inflict heavy casualties on attacking Americans. When the Americans attacked, the volume of rifle fire surprised even these veterans. The report noted that American infantry advanced by squads, with half of each squad firing continuously while the other half moved. The suppressive fire from American rifles was heavy enough that German soldiers couldn't maintain aimed fire in response. Machine gun teams attempting to engage were immediately targeted by multiple American riflemen, whose semi-automatic fire could quickly accumulate rounds on target. The German position held for 40 minutes before being overrun. Casualties were moderate, but the tactical lesson was clear. German infantry, even elite paratroopers in prepared positions, struggled to stop American attacks when every American rifleman could deliver sustained fire. The report recommended increased allocation of automatic weapons to German infantry units to achieve firepower parity with American rifle squads. This recommendation appeared in dozens of similar reports from Sicily. German tactical experts understood the problem but couldn't solve it through doctrine or training alone. They needed equivalent weapons. The Italian campaign from September 1943 through spring 1945 provided a prolonged laboratory for studying how the M1 Garand affected infantry combat across diverse terrain and conditions. From Salerno's beaches through the mountains of Monte Cassino to the Gothic Line's fortified positions, German forces fought American infantry equipped entirely with Garands. The accumulated experience filled volumes of tactical analysis and prompted intense debates within German military circles about how to respond. German soldiers developed profound respect for the M1 Garand, respect that sometimes bordered on envy. Captured American rifles were prized by German troops despite regulations against using enemy weapons. The practical advantages were too obvious to ignore. A German soldier with a captured Garand could deliver firepower, equivalent to 2 or 3 soldiers with Kar 98K rifles. In defensive situations where ammunition conservation mattered less than suppressive fire, the Garand was clearly superior. Fallschirmjäger units, German paratroopers known for their initiative and aggressive tactics, showed particular interest in captured Garands. These elite soldiers understood that in the close-quarters combat they frequently encountered, semi-automatic fire provided decisive advantages. Photographic evidence from Italy shows German paratroopers carrying M1 Garands alongside their issued weapons. While official policy discouraged this practice, frontline realities trumped policy. Soldiers used whatever weapons gave them the best chance of survival. The psychological dimension of facing sustained Garand fire affected German morale in ways difficult to quantify but evident in soldier accounts and unit reports. German infantry had entered the war confident in their training, their equipment, and their tactical range, a doctrine. That confidence eroded through repeated experiences of being outgunned at the individual level. A German soldier might be better trained than his American opponent, might occupy superior terrain, might have more combat experience. But if he carried a Kar 98K and the American carried an M1 Garand, the American had a tangible advantage that training and experience couldn't fully overcome. This realization spread through German units in Italy as 1943 turned to 1944. Letters home from German soldiers, intercepted and analyzed by Allied intelligence, frequently mentioned American firepower. These letters didn't typically discuss tactical details, but they expressed frustration at being unable to effectively return fire during engagements. German soldiers described feeling suppressed, pinned down, unable to shoot back effectively even when they wanted to fight. This sense of tactical helplessness, even among otherwise capable and motivated troops, indicated how thoroughly the M1 Garand had shifted the infantry firepower balance. German weapons development programs accelerated in response to combat experience, but acceleration couldn't overcome years of delayed start. The Gewehr 43, Walther's improved semi-automatic rifle design, entered production in October 1943. The G43 corrected many of the G41's flaws. It used a simpler gas port system similar to the Soviet SVT-40. It featured a detachable 10-round magazine rather than the integral magazine of earlier designs. It was lighter than the G41, more reliable, and easier to manufacture. Production numbers for the G43 reached approximately 400,000 rifles by war's end, a significant quantity but utterly inadequate for Germany's needs. In the same period, American production of M1 Garands exceeded 5 million rifles. Even at peak production, Germany produced roughly one G43 for every dozen Garands America manufactured. The vast majority of German infantry continued carrying Kar 98K bolt-action rifles until Germany's surrender. The few German soldiers who received G43 rifles appreciated their capabilities but also noted their limitations compared to captured American Garands. The G43 was more complex than the M1, with more small parts that could break or malfunction. Its detachable magazine, while offering tactical flexibility for reloading, proved vulnerable to damage and dirt. Springs weakened, feed lips bent, and magazines were easily lost in combat. The G43's gas system, while functional, required more frequent cleaning than the Garand's overbuilt components tolerated. Most critically, the G43 arrived too late to affect German tactical doctrine or training in meaningful ways. By the time significant numbers reached frontline units in mid to late 1944, Germany was fighting defensively across all fronts. Industrial capacity was declining under strategic bombing. Ammunition production couldn't keep pace with consumption. Even soldiers equipped with G43 rifles often lacked adequate ammunition to exploit their weapons' capabilities. The German military establishment never developed training programs and tactical doctrine built around semi-automatic rifle fire the way American forces had done starting in the late 1930s. The story of Germany's true answer to American rifle firepower wasn't the G43. It was the Sturmgewehr 44, the world's first practical assault rifle. The St. G44 represented revolutionary thinking that went beyond simply matching American semi-automatic capability. If Americans could give every soldier 8 rapid shots from a semi-automatic rifle, why not give German soldiers 30 shots with selective fire capability, including full automatic? The St. G44 fired a new intermediate cartridge, the 7.92 by 33 mm Kurz. This cartridge was less powerful than full-sized rifle rounds like the 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser or American 30-06, but it was effective to 300 meters and produced manageable recoil in full automatic fire. The rifle could fire semi-automatic like a Garand or full automatic like a submachine gun, all from a 30-round detachable magazine. It was lighter than either the Kar 98K with ammunition load or the MP40 submachine gun. Development of what would become the St. G44 began in 1942 as the Maschinen Carabiner 42, evolving through several design iterations before reaching production form. Hitler initially opposed the program, preferring resources devoted to proven weapons rather than experimental rifles. But combat reports from both the Eastern and Western fronts consistently emphasized the firepower advantage enjoyed by opponents, whether Soviet submachine gunners or American Garand-equipped infantry. By 1943, Hitler approved expanded production. Approximately 426,000 Sate G44 rifles were produced between 1943 and 1945, primarily issued to units on the Eastern Front where Soviet tactics emphasized close-range combat. The weapon performed excellently when soldiers had it. German troops equipped with St. G44S could dominate firefights through sheer volume of fire. But like the G43, the St. G44 arrived too late and in too few numbers. Most German soldiers never saw one. Those who did often lacked adequate ammunition as Germany's industrial infrastructure crumbled under Allied bombing. The St. G44 represented what German infantry might have carried if weapons development had started 5 years earlier, if production capacity had been adequate, if strategic planning had anticipated the need for increased individual firepower. Instead, it arrived as a glimpse of what might have been, too late to change outcomes, but influential enough to shape post-war weapons development worldwide. Every modern assault rifle from the AK-47 to the M16 traces conceptual lineage to the St. G44's innovative design. But in the actual fighting of 1944 and 1945, German infantry predominantly carried Kar 98K rifles, while facing American infantry entirely equipped with M1 Garands. This disparity affected every infantry engagement across every theatre where American and German forces met. The tactical mathematics never changed. 8 rapid semi-automatic shots beat 5 slower bolt-action shots in virtually every firefight scenario. Multiply that advantage across squad, platoon, and company levels, and American infantry enjoyed systematic firepower superiority that German forces couldn't effectively counter. The Normandy invasion in June 1944 brought these realities to German forces defending France. At Omaha Beach on June 6th, the 352nd Infantry Division occupied excellent defensive positions, with interlocking fields of fire, reinforced bunkers, and extensive obstacles. They inflicted heavy casualties on attacking Americans during the initial landing, but as American soldiers reached the base of the bluffs and began advancing on German positions, the volume of rifle fire forced German defenders to remain under cover. German soldiers attempting to engage Americans advancing below their positions found themselves targeted by dozens of semi-automatic rifles simultaneously. Machine gun crews drawing fire from American riflemen couldn't maintain effective fire because the incoming volume was too heavy. Individual German soldiers rising to throw grenades or fire rifles met immediate response from multiple M1 Garands, whose operators could fire 8 times before needing to reload. The tactical dynamic that played out across Normandy's beaches repeated the lessons from North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. American infantry firepower at the individual soldier level exceeded German capacity to respond effectively. Through the hedgerow country of Normandy in June and July 1944, the Garand's advantages became even more pronounced. Combat occurred at ranges often under 100 meters in confined spaces between earthen walls. Traditional German tactics of fire and maneuver broke down against American squads that could maintain continuous rifle fire while maneuvering. German soldiers attempting to cover their squad's movement couldn't generate sufficient suppressive fire with bolt-action rifles. American soldiers could. The cumulative effect across thousands of small unit actions contributed to American tactical success during the Normandy breakout. This wasn't the only factor. American artillery, air superiority, numerical advantage, and logistics all mattered enormously. But at the squad and platoon level, where infantry actually fought, the M1 Garand provided consistent advantage that German infantry couldn't overcome through superior tactics or defensive positions alone. By late 1944, captured German documents and prisoner interrogations revealed widespread recognition among German soldiers that American rifle firepower was superior. This knowledge affected morale and tactical decision-making. German units, knowing they would face American infantry, planned more cautiously, relied more heavily on prepared positions and automatic weapons, and showed less willingness to engage in meeting engagements where rifle fire would determine outcomes. This defensive mindset, while tactically sensible given the equipment disparity, ceded initiative to American forces and contributed to Germany's deteriorating strategic position. The Battle of the Bulge, in December 1944, provided one final demonstration of the M1 Garand's tactical value under extreme conditions. German forces launched a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, initially achieving significant gains and surrounding American units at several locations. American soldiers fought desperate defensive actions with whatever equipment they possessed, often in isolated positions with limited support. The M1 Garand functioned reliably in sub-zero temperatures and allowed outnumbered American units to generate firepower disproportionate to their numbers. German after-action reports from the Bulge offensive noted that even isolated American positions proved difficult to overrun because of the volume of rifle fire they could deliver. Small groups of Americans in fortified buildings or crossroads positions could hold against larger German forces because every American rifleman could fire 8 aimed shots rapidly and repeatedly. German assault tactics that worked against Soviet forces, armed with bolt-action Mosin Nagant rifles, failed against Americans with Garands. The fundamental tactical equation remained constant from Tunisia in 1943 through Germany itself in 1945. Superior individual firepower, distributed across every rifleman in a unit, provided advantages that accumulated through every level of combat. Those advantages didn't guarantee victory in any single engagement. German soldiers remained formidable opponents with excellent training and tactical skill. But across thousands of engagements, the firepower advantage provided by the M1 Garand contributed measurably to American tactical success. When Hauptmann Weber had examined that captured Garand in March 1943, he had recognized a weapon that challenged German assumptions about infantry combat. 2 years later, as Germany collapsed under Allied pressure from all directions, that recognition had spread throughout the German military. The Americans hadn't won through rifle superiority alone, but they had equipped their infantry with a weapon that gave every soldier capabilities German soldiers with bolt-action rifles couldn't match. The M1 Garand's legacy extended far beyond its World War II service. It established the principle that semi-automatic fire was not merely desirable but essential for modern infantry. Rifles. Every military that studied World War II's lessons reached similar conclusions. The future of infantry weapons lay in self-loading rifles that eliminated manual cycling between shots. The specific mechanisms varied, but the fundamental principle endured. The Germans had learned this lesson the hardest way possible, through combat against an enemy whose foresight and industrial capacity had provided superior equipment to its soldiers. The 8-round en-bloc clip, the gas-operated system, the overbuilt components designed for reliability under harsh conditions, all of these represented choices made years before the war began, choices that paid dividends throughout the conflict. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.